Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to wait a minute here, get everyone in the room. While we wait a quick second, I'm going to launch a poll. We see who's here. So while we're waiting just a second, feel free to answer the poll and we'll see who's here. We see the numbers flashing of who's coming in, so I'll wait for it to slow down before we begin. Tom, sorry, did that? Okay, here we go. Sorry. Let's try that again. Let's launch the poll.
I just wasn't sure if I should answer also.
Great. Lots of parents and students, mostly parents, a lot of 11th graders. This is the time. All right, I think we can get started now. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Sorry we got started a minute late. That was me and my brain fart. But anyway, we're so glad you can join us. We know everyone's super busy, so we're always appreciative that you've taken your time out to do this. I'm going to start with just a couple of housekeeping items. Anyone who is signed up for this will get a recording after. So feel free to, do what you need to do. And if you need to rewatch something, we'll rewatch it again tomorrow or the next day. And if you can't join for all of it, certainly you're welcome to watch it again at any point. We do have a Q&A box. Since Tom and I are presenting, we're going to ask that, yes, this is underrated factors to selecting the right college. Sorry, that was a question in there. We're going to ask that you put the questions, wherever you'd like, probably in the Q&A box is best, and then we'll try to answer them towards the end. We'll have a little room for Q&A there. All right. Okay. And then who is Collegewise? That's us. So Collegewise started in 1999 with a man named Kevin, who's our founder. He started in People's Kitchens. He had 9 students when he started, and he used to go from house to house doing individual college counseling. And over the years, it's just grown and grown and grown. We now have about 100 counselors, and then we have served about 26,000 students over the last 24 years. So we love what we do. We're a bunch of college nerds. We love going on tours. We love researching schools, and we love working with families. It's really the highlight of our days when we get to meet with students and talk with them about all the different pieces of the high school puzzle and the college puzzle. So we enjoy that a lot. What else can I say about Collegewise? We really believe that there are so many colleges for every student. We don't believe that there's necessarily one and only, or we don't believe that one school is necessarily the best for a student, but we really believe there's lots of matches and lots of great schools out there, and lots of great schools that people don't even know about. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So my name's Anita Godula. I'm a Collegewise counselor. I'm based in Chicago. Before Collegewise, I was mostly in the college. I was mostly on college campuses. I was an academic advisor at the University of Chicago in particular, and that's how I got into this kind of work. Again, I love working one-on-one with students, and that's what really makes me happy. And so I'm excited to talk to you all tonight about some of the conversations that we have with students. With that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Tom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our homes. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Tom Barry. I'm also a college counselor with Collegewise. I've been here for 9 years, and with Collegewise. Prior to that, I was working for a school called African Leadership Academy in South Africa. And prior to that, I was in grad school at Stanford, and prior to that, I was working on the college admission side at Colorado College. So I've been working on both sides of the desk in terms of both reading applications and working with students who are working on applying and filling out their essays and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we like, that, well, not that we like, but those of us who do counseling like, and that draws us to this part of the job, is getting to work with students over a more longitudinal basis, and being able to not only look, when you're on the admission side, you look and you say, okay, here's who's here, and here's what they've done, but being able to work with students as they look at different colleges and explore and develop different ideas and perspectives, and hopefully, ideally, do a little bit of soul searching and introspection as well, as they're thinking about, okay, what do I actually want? So with that, we'll get things started with just some of the things that we're going to touch on today. And this is by no means an exhaustive 100% every stone unturned sort of discussion that we're going to be having. But I think a lot of times this is true for both 10th graders and 11th graders, both of which we seem to have quite a few of here, and parents of those students. There are students for whom college is a seemingly far off unattainable goal. There are students for whom college is a perceived inevitability. And there are students for whom college is a one path of many that I could take. And so we want to make sure that we kind of talk about, we are college counselors, so we view things kind of through that lens, but also want to reinforce that is certainly not the only possible path to happiness and success and joy in life. But because we are talking about specifically that college and university path that some students choose to take, we do want to reinforce that this is not necessarily the flashiest, most glamorous part of finding yourself in college. And I can tell you, having been a high school student myself, as Anita has been, and is a parent of one right now, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to get motivated about, because you spend all day doing homework and then it's like, oh great, more homework, college homework, but I don't get to go for a long time. But it is an important thing to do, and then we'll talk about why those things are important, and in why building a list of colleges, not necessarily finding that one perfect place, but building a perfect list, is really important. And then also share some resources that we have, and that we've found students can find really helpful as they go through this research process and eventually into application. So I think these are some very heady questions sometimes for students to start thinking about, but so you can rephrase them in ways that might feel a little bit more attuned to wherever you are in this particular part of the cycle, the school year, or the process. But I think it is important to think about why, as a student, to think about what is the purpose of this? What is this? What is the reason? I think far too often, and we do find this with some of our students, and we try to work around this in a way of not necessarily trying to convince them that that the concept is false, but trying to help them realize that there's more to it than that. A lot of times students sort of see going off to college as the end. It's sort of like, that is the result of my years of hard work and dedication and involvement. And as a reward, I was admitted into a college and now I get to go. And so that is the end of this whole thing. But as those of us who have been will tell you, it's very much just the beginning. It is probably the first huge life-changing decision you get to make, but spoiler alert, you're going to have to make a lot more huge life-changing decisions. This is just the first one. But it is important to not necessarily, when we frame this, we try not to make it too grandiose when we say, like, why do you want to attend? But try to think more specifically of what do I hope to get out of this experience? And when you're thinking about it that way, it's, a lot of times we'll talk a little bit more about this. Like, the easiest thing is to say to get an education, but you're really only in school and in class part of the time at the very most. You are also living in a city or a town or on a campus that's, Deep Springs, a cattle ranch. You are living there too. You are also surrounded by human beings who are your friends and peers and could potentially be coworkers. Like, there is more to it than just the education, the raw classroom education. And I think, I try not to I don't want to harp on this idea too much but I do want to face the reality that for those of us who have been to college, a lot of times the reason that we are happy we went to the universities where we attended were different than the reasons we went there in the first place. And that's part of what growth is. And so a lot of what a college is about is finding that environment, or at least identifying pieces of that environment that will nurture that growth in whatever direction it happens to grow or take you as you go through that path. But I don't want to pretend. I mean, I was an English major and I went to grad school for education policy. So I don't want to pretend that there aren't people who are very goal oriented and say, I want to be there when 15 years from now. So let me work back a 15-year plan to get there. That is okay. So the question of where you want to become, if you say, I want to be a dentist in 15 years and you want to work backwards and plan your college search, great. That's a starting point. That's a place to start. If you are a little bit more like me and you're just like, I want to be happy-ish and live somewhere where there's water and mountains, like that's sort of my approach, I think, then that's a different, might be a slightly different calculus. But what's important is that there's going to be people around you that either nurture or kind of push for or push against sometimes, and usually both, those sorts of goals. And so when we talk about community, that is a huge part of it, because these peers that you have on a day-to-day basis, both in class, in the dorms, over breaks that you'll be spending, whether it's on campus or that you'll be spending time with other students, or if it's more important for you to be closer to home and have that literal community that you grew up with, thinking about what that community looks like, and if you want something similar, different, like that is something that is going to be important to take into account. And it is one of those questions that can evolve. Some people might say, I feel comfortable here, and that's why I want to push myself. And some people might say, I feel comfortable here, and that's why I want to keep this component of my life in place. And we're not going to talk too much about majors today, because we have all read the statistics, and they are true that 75% of people change their majors over the course of their college careers. I did. Also, I actually had the registrar at one point at Colorado College tell me that he was just changing me back to undeclared because I changed my major too many times. He was like, I don't want to do the paperwork anymore. Colorado College, for those who know, has the block plan, and the block plan, you do one class at a time for 3.5 weeks. And just every class I had, I loved the professor so much, I switched to that major, and I did that 7 times in freshman year. And the registrar was like, you know what, you have another year, and I'm just gonna go here, make you undeclared. But the hope is that you have at least some concept of what you hope to gain, whether it's a 15-year plan, a 10-year plan, just a 4-year plan, or just a 2-year plan of what you hope to get out of this entire experience of the college application and also college attendance. So, talked about some of these questions already, but I do want to make sure to kind of mention them in a little bit more detail, and frame these in a way of how we would actually approach this talking to students, because it's like, we don't just give them a list of questions that are like, where do you see yourself in 15 years? And, what increments do you want in order to get there? We do talk to students. Thinking about things in too grandiose of a phrasing or anything is a great way to not get started on anything. And I feel that way too. But there are things that you do want to think about. And that is thinking about current environment spoken very broadly. So there's physical environment, there's social environment, there's community involvement, there's environment, there's academic environment. So some students go to extremely competitive high schools, and some might say, hey, that's great for me. I love the I love the fact that people push me. I love the fact that I'm just like grinding away even for this grade. It actually makes me work harder than I thought I could. And I want to continue that. Some students who are in very competitive high school, and I don't mean competitive in terms of ranking, I mean competitive in terms of interpersonal competition. Some people feel that and then say, you know what, I want to go to a place where it's a little bit more collaborative. I would just love to not have to worry about what somebody else is doing so that I can do something better, but more worry about something somebody else is doing so that I can figure out a way to combine our ideas and work together on a project. When I talk about physical, if you are growing up in a rural or suburban area, that might be great. And you might want to kind of try to keep that, or you might want to move to a place where you don't need a car, or you don't have a car and you have to move to a place where you don't need a car. Or if you are living in a city and you don't want to leave that city, or if you live in a very diverse community and you want to make sure that you maintain that level of diversity because you feel like you learn something from your peers every single day, or vice versa. You know, I had a student who went to a private all girls private Catholic school recently, and you know, her list was mostly either women's colleges or private Catholic colleges, because that level of connection, she was like, I love that we go to chapel together. It's something that we share, and that we have that kind of binds us. All totally fine. So thinking about those physical and emotional and social environments is something that, you know, and there is a combination of those that you can make. You know, like you can say, I live in a city and I want to be in a non-urban environment, but I also go to a competitive school and I want to go to a collaborative one. You know, like these are not things that are mutually exclusive. But thinking about what aspects of the past can inform the future of what might be a really supportive environment for you. And then thinking about then continuing though to think about more towards the academic sense, and thinking about the things that you would like, not just to learn, not just to major in, but like, what would you like to explore? High school is necessarily kind of I don't want to call it limiting, but it is structured. You know, at a lot of high schools, at most high schools in the country, up until senior year, you can't necessarily choose your classes. You can only choose what level of that class you are taking potentially. It's like the non-honors, honors, AP or IB or whatever. Like, but you don't have a choice about US history. You're just going to be taking it. So are there areas, and you know, one of the great things about college is that college courses are not US history. College courses are like cavalry regiments of the Civil War. Like they are very concrete and very specific. That's how people get PhDs. You can't get a PhD in US history anymore. You have to have a very specific specialty. And that's why, and then you teach a class about it. But those are areas that like that level of rabbit hole diving that students sometimes really enjoy, really dive into. That I almost extended that metaphor too far. That students really particularly enjoy. That's something that you actually get to do, which is a really valuable piece. But in the meantime, it is important to question and interrogate to an extent. Could I do this already, and at least get a sense of what those fields are like before I start picking a college about it? And so there are Coursera classes, there are community college classes, there are just a lot of different ways that you can do that sooner, before you start trying to pick a college and make that sort of time and emotional and financial investment towards a particular focus. And last but not least, thinking about all of these different things in terms of priorities, in the sense that there are so many factors. There's essentially an infinite number of factors that go into a college, because no one is the same. But those priorities are not in the same order for each individual person. So someone might think that being within a 50-mile radius of home is actually the paramount thing for me. Great. You already have parameters to help you limit your college, your college research. Or someone might say, I can't imagine going somewhere that didn't have a nursing major. If I might not do it, but I really want to make sure it's an option. That's fine too. So just thinking about what are those priorities, and you don't have to have them written down, but trying to be honest with yourself about what are those priorities, and having some sense of, not, they don't all have to be equal, and they won't all be equal in your list of possible options. And all of this added up, and we're going to talk through some of the mechanics of this too, but all of this added up comes to your final decision that you get to make. Sorry, I skipped a slide. Nope, I skipped a slide. No, I meant to go to, I was ahead of myself. These are the questions. These are the main areas of questions that we would be asking, because I kind of specified already. We're talking about social, academic. I didn't mention financial, but that does come into play certainly. And size and location. These are kind of like, broadly speaking, the things that most students are looking at. And that leads you eventually to the decision part about just trying to find a place that fits all of those pieces together. So at Collegewise, we try to say, and this is easy for us to say, but the perfect college is the college where you can do what you want and be the best person that you can be, that you can afford, and that will admit you. That is the holy trinity of the perfect college. You're not trying to find the perfect college by just doing the research, though. That's an important piece. So at this point, for sophomores, juniors, freshmen, if you really want to get going early, you are not trying to pick a different college. That is a decision about where to go, is trying to see how all of those pieces fit together. Right now, you don't need to find the perfect college. You want to find the perfect list of colleges that fit some or all of these parameters. And I'll tell you, there are some students for whom their college list is just very, very clear. You can look at it and just, I had a student that I worked with earlier today who I had never met before, and he told me that his list was University of Illinois, Purdue, University of Washington, Cal Poly, all the UCs, Carnegie Mellon, Case Western. I mean, we had never met before, so he was just telling me this. And I was like, oh, so you're going to be a philosophy major? And he gave me a very weird look. But like every college counselor has seen that and knows that the next on the list is going to be Georgia Tech, because this is a computer science major. Like we know that, and that's very clear. But that is the anomaly. The more common thing is students who have a college list that makes sense, but that doesn't mean that they like every school for identical reasons. They might like one school mostly for the academic piece, one school because they know they're going to get scholarship money, another school because they know that they can be in the marching band. That's the most common way to approach a lot of these choices, or approach a lot of this research part. So with that, I'll kick it back over to Anita, who will talk a lot more about what that looks like.
Great. Thanks, Tom. All right. So Tom talked a lot about priorities, the big questions. You want to start there and really make sure the attention is focused on the student and what the student needs and wants. Now we get to the other part, which is the college research part. Once you figured out your priorities, you can already then start looking at schools. And sometimes these things kind of happen hand in hand, which I'll talk about in a minute. But for me personally, when I think about college, it is a big investment, right? It is just something you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money, and you're investing something. And for most people, if you're going to buy a new car, a new house, even a new dress, you're going to do a couple of different phases. And I like to say there's at least 3 phases in the college research process, if not more, but 3 big ones that I can think of. And I think this is true for most shopping, where you're investing some big time or money or something that's really important to you. So the first phase is what I call window shopping. Then we're talking about browsing the aisles, and then finally trying it on. So when we talk about window shopping, I often say, you want to kind of know what some of the big pieces are, what's out there. And I actually tell students that the best thing to do, especially if you're a freshman or sophomore, but even a junior, go to 2 colleges near you. They can be anything you want. No commitment, no information session, no tour, just go to 2 schools. And I like to say, pick 2 different schools. So I'm in Chicago. I tell students often, go to DePaul or Loyola, which are in the city. DePaul is very much a city campus, no defined campus. Loyola is a little bit more defined, but it's still in the city. And they are, both private universities. And then go out to the suburbs and check out two smaller schools, Elmhurst University, Lake Forest, or North Central. Pick two different schools and see like what resonates with you, what doesn't. And as you're learning this, as you're exploring, you're learning about different types of schools. And I will tell you that my dad and my parents were educated in India. I was born and raised in the US, but in ninth grade, my dad felt like, wow, this college thing is this big deal. And like, how do we start? Where do we begin? How do we know it's important? So anytime we'd go visit some auntie, uncle, for the Indian people out in the audience, we would just stop at a school. Again, no commitment. And I saw a lot of schools and I realized along the way, you know what? I really needed a small school. I went to a small high school and the small schools really appealed to me. So again, that's a little bit of the window shopping. There's lots of tools and resources to help you. Um, I like to, with my students, I sort of help them think about how do they like to do research, because Tom and I think college research is really fun, but most of our students are like, "Ugh, what? You're making me do work, more work," as Tom said earlier. So we try to make it fun. I have students who tell me that they're very visual. I had a student who did a PowerPoint presentation for me as her college research, which was really fun. She's going to go into marketing probably. She's a very visual eye, and so she made these slides with different schools and what she liked about each one. She had some pictures, some info. So that was her way of doing research. I have students who tell me, you know what, I'm happiest when I'm watching like a YouTube video. Fine, go for it. Go onto YouTube, do a day in the life of, someone from the University of Michigan. You're probably going to find a video. Sometimes they're made by students, sometimes they're made by the college itself. But there's a lot of tools. For most of our students, niche seems to be pretty particularly popular if you like to read things. It's kind of the Yelp version for college, and they've got a lot of reviews, and it's a pretty easy site to navigate. In terms of books, the FIS guide is probably the industry standard. It's only got about I think it's 200 or 250 schools in there. So it's not a lot, but they do a really nice job because they send out surveys to students, bring them back and compile them into interesting information. So you get to hear, about the traditions, the costs, and social life on campus, as well as academic majors. Um, like I said, there's lots of videos out there. The college tour is a new one. It's a big, long infomercial about colleges. Um, I honestly really like it because it's something I can sometimes play in the background while I'm doing something else, like cooking dinner or whatever. And I'm not really like really paying attention, but I get to see some campuses that I just don't have the time or money to go visit in person. And so I get to see some different things. But colleges pay a lot of money to be on the college tour. It's on Amazon, or you can download their free app. And it's just a fun way, like I said, to learn about some schools that are maybe farther away. So without that commitment, like I said, of spending the time and the money to go somewhere. And then definitely real life, going to those information sessions, those tours. I was a tour guide, as were I think most college counselors at Collegewise. And we do like our tours. They can feel pretty exhausting after a while. So as you're doing tours, information sessions, just space yourself out. So that's a little bit about that first stage, window shopping. So you know your own priorities, as you start looking at schools, you're going to refine and see like, okay, great. These are some things that are really important to me, and that, maybe you realize like you really want to be in the city. So you only look at city campuses, or you realize like I really want a particular major. So you're looking for those majors. The next part is what I call browsing the aisles, and you're trying to get a deeper look. So, if you were shopping for a dress, first you window shop and then you go into the store, look around, see more of what they've got, see what those price points are like. Um, I love college websites, but I will say that they can be like a big bad rabbit hole. You really need to know what you're looking for before you start looking at a college website. And there's lots of different ways to kind of read them, if you will. Certainly, a lot of people go to the admissions site, and that is a great place to start. If you just want to know what their requirements are, what that application is like. The university news page will tell you a lot. That is, again, mostly PR material. So, it's fantastic to know what's going on at the university. But I like to say that some of those big, shiny, glossy websites and brochures are, I mean, they're marketing material, which is fine, but sometimes you want to know a little deeper. I think for a lot of people, academic degree plans are fantastic to look at, especially if you're not decided about a major or you have some inkling of some things you might want to try. The Arizona State University website is particularly good. They've got these major maps for different kinds of majors, so you can see what classes are actually required in a major. You might want to think a little bit about if the university has a lot of general education requirements or not. There's a wide range out there. One extreme is like the University of Chicago or Columbia University, which have very strict core curriculums, and there's not a lot of leeway those first 2 years to choose what you want. Then you have on the other side of the spectrum, a place like Brown, where you go in, you can just take anything you want. There are really no requirements. Most places fall somewhere in the middle of that, where they have a few requirements and maybe there's some flexibility about how you fulfill them. But that's an important piece for students to look at because that'll be, maybe a significant amount of your time. A lot of people do like to look at career services, outcomes, see who recruits on campus. Some of that information is online. Some of it you have to go in and see the college itself. Some students are really interested in research opportunities or study abroad. Those are great things to look at on a college website as well. Those are usually pretty clear. I personally love the unfiltered look. So like I said, some of the stuff is marketing and it's PR. My kids, they're 12 and 15. They think I'm really creepy. But my favorite thing to do is to go on a college campus and sit in a busy place. Maybe it's the student union or the snack bar or just like in the middle of some quad somewhere and I kind of people watch, what are they wearing? Are they dressed up for all the time or are they, excuse me, are most people dressed up or are they, walking around in like sweatpants? What are they talking about? Do they look stressed? Do they look happy? Like what's going on? And sometimes you just get a vibe. And so that's a fun way to look. I have a friend who's a college counselor. She loves to pretend to be lost on a college campus to see if people notice that she's lost and if they will help her. She also likes to see if people open the doors for other people. These are clearly her priorities. This is important to her to have that sense of community and that people are going to be helpful and supportive. Whatever it is you're looking for, I think some of that unfiltered look can be great. The other thing I really truly love is a campus newspaper, and I actually follow quite a few of them. They're mostly online now, which is, especially good. And it's students writing for the student newspaper usually. So you get to see what's on students' minds. And I think that's a really neat way to like, again, see what that culture, see what that vibe is. Are you getting, a more conservative or liberal leaning politically? Is that important to you? What kinds of things are people talking about on campus? Is it about, the football games, or are they talking about research on campus? Maybe you get some ideas of what's important to them through that. Certainly social media pages and local news are also great. There's so much that's accessible, just from home. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that. So the last part is trying it on. And usually this happens, after you get in, where you go visit a campus, maybe stay overnight, meet some more students, really try to see yourself and see if you're gonna, if you can picture yourself there and going there. One of the things I like to say, and the reason I've got Taylor and Ellen helping me out here is because you might have you and your best friend, you've grown up together, you had some similar experiences, but maybe going to college, you want very different things, and that's okay. Or maybe you and your best friend have different price points that are comfortable to you. Whatever it is, don't make a decision based on someone else. Make the decision for yourself. And give you an example. So I went to this really small high school with 110 people in my graduating class. I realized very early on in my college search process that I wanted to go to a smaller school. I was super undecided about what I wanted. I ended up at Williams College in Massachusetts, which was a great fit for me. Um, Two of my closest friends went to NYU because they were like, I'm tired of this small place where everyone knows all my business, and they wanted big city life. And that was really important to them. And so to each their own. We can have, we grew up together, we went to the same high school, we had very similar classes, but the things that we needed from college were just different because we were individuals. So again, don't do something just because someone else says it's good. All right. Um, Going back to whether people think is good, a little word about rankings. So there's a lot of rankings out there. US News is probably the most popular, notorious, well-known one out there. They've been under a lot of fire if you've looked at the news about US News. So you can read that on your own. But what's really important when you look at the rankings is what data are they looking at? And, are they measuring what's important to you? And that's the most important thing. So we mentioned a couple of other sites here. The Department of Ed has a great website, and they in particular have, I think it's like average debt at graduation and average salaries for a few years after graduation. These are only people who have had federal loans. So it's a skewed kind of set of the population, but certainly it's an interesting thing to find out, like who's employed 5 years after graduation, what are their salaries like? Poets and Quants is one of our favorite ones at Collegewise. It's all business stuff. So if you're interested in business, it'll rank some different schools for you. It'll talk about different kinds of business programs. Again, look out there. I had a student 2 years ago who his dad's a chef, and he felt like food was really important. He found food rankings for colleges, and he would go to every campus. And actually, I just talked to him a few weeks ago. He still goes to his friends' campuses and he tries out the food at all these places. So I'm like, great, go for it. It's fun. But again, what's important to you? All right. Again, I want you to go back to yourself and think a little bit about what kinds of questions are you asking? Think about your priorities, think about the college, and don't just ask the question of, is this school good or bad? Every person, every college out there has its strengths and weaknesses, right? So what are the strengths of a particular school? Is that school right for you in terms of what you want? And so these are important questions because again, it shifts the conversation, and it's not about the college, but it's really about that fit piece that we talk so much about in the college counseling world. So I would say, these are three great questions that we like to flip for students. What's the right college? Where will you be successful is really the true answer, right? Is it going to be, school X or school Y? And then you have to answer for yourself why. And then what's the best college? Guess what? There are about 5,000 schools out there, but half of those are 2-year institutions or community colleges. About half of them are 4-year institutions. If you sat down and wrote a list of all the colleges you knew, I bet you probably wouldn't even get to 100. There are so many more schools out there that we just don't know about. Even for me and Tom, who've been in this business for a while, we both have masters in higher ed, and there's still schools that I find today that I'm like, oh, this is a really neat school. Why have I never heard of this one before? And so there's a lot of neat opportunities out there, and I'd like you to, just look out for for all the different options. All right, just gonna beat the horse for now and say that the biggest strategies for success is really thinking about you and what fits you. You will have much less stress in this process. You'll have a greater degree of success as well. We like to say that, most students are applying to a certain number of schools. We want a lot of them to be those target schools so that you have a good chance of getting into them. And then you've got some options. We love having, students to have options more than anything else. College is expensive. So if you apply to more targeted likely schools, that means that you're probably more willing, more, you're going to get better financial awards is basically what it is. And these terms, Tom will talk in a minute about them, but they mean different things for different people. A reach for one person might not be, might be a target for someone else. But I'll let Tom get into that next in terms of these practicalities. But again, like Tom said, it's about a dream list, not a dream college.
Yeah, and in terms of the practicalities, again, everybody makes their own choices. So as counselors, we provide advice, recommendations. People get to make their own choices. So usually people ask how many colleges is it worth applying to, and that seems like a pretty straightforward question, and it is for a lot of students. Um, it their answer is twofold though, because almost every college will require an application fee. So thinking, and that usually ranges from anywhere from like 50 to 100-ish dollars per school. That is true also for those of you in California, well, or for those of you anywhere. For the UC schools, where yes, it is one application, and yes, there are no supplemental essays, but yes, you have to submit an extra application fee. You have to pay $75 per school that you are applying to. So just things to keep in mind, I guess, as you're looking at these different campuses. So how many, we think about it that way. You're only going to get so much bang for your buck in terms of how much you're willing to spend on application fees. We think from a very practical standpoint, how much work is a student able to do on not just the applications, but the essays, the applications being just filling out name and birth date over and over again, but also the essays themselves. And then here's the really critical thing, and this is a subjective thing for most families. We really just encourage you to try to walk that line between wanting to stretch yourself without stretching yourself too far, wanting to not regret that you didn't try something or give it a shot at some place, but also recognizing that no matter how many places you hear yes from, you are only going to say yes to one. So you might have 12 admission offers from colleges in your pocket at the end of this whole cycle. You're still only going to go to one of those places. So you just want to think about things somewhat strategically. And I'm going to give a non-answer, which is I'm just not going to give a number of colleges, because we also want to think about it. We think about it in terms of workload and finances, and all of those things that go into choosing the ideal college also go into choosing the ideal college list. There's finances that have to do with application fees. There's academics, which is doing the actual work to apply. And then there's just the practicality, social element of, would I even go there if I were admitted? And if not, then whose time are you wasting? It's actually only yours. But with that being said, we do want to have, so while we don't try to say like, here's the number, we do recommend that you at least have a balance, whatever that balance happens to be. And that usually includes at least 2 safe or likely schools, preferably, I would say, at least one of those as an in-state likely option. It's amazing how things change in a year, from when and not even a year, 6 months from when a student applies until when they actually go, and what those priorities happen to be. If you don't apply, you don't have that as an option. So thinking about having 2 safe or likely schools is usually how we would recommend. And the rest you can feel free to agree or disagree, or go your direction on that. We're not going to force anybody to do it, but that's at least our recommendation. But as in thinking about the research piece of this, what we do, I tell students all the time, in our own kind of system called WiserNet, we have a spot to take notes. And I always tell students, you can take notes here, but don't do it for me. If you take notes here, great. If you take notes on your phone, great. If you take notes on a spreadsheet, great. If you're 38 like me and you still use pieces of paper, take notes there, as long as you keep that piece of paper. Just make sure you write things down, because you are going to be coming back to those notes more often than you think as we're continuing to go through these colleges, when you're trying to kind of sort through what is going to be a priority for you. And frankly, logistically speaking, again, when you're actually filling out and trying to answer that question of, why are you applying to Michigan? It's really unhelpful if you have to then go back to the website for another hour and a half and try to find that one program you thought was really interesting 6 months ago. So try to make sure you do that. For parents, it's not necessarily for parents, but parents are usually the ones who are thinking this way. We do recommend that you do the estimated family contribution calculation and also the net price calculator. Every college is required by law to have it on their website. Sometimes it's a little bit buried, but if you just Google college name net price calculator, they will all have that. And they are required to have that to give you at least a very rough estimate of what the finances would be like for your family. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give them accurate information, they can't give you a net price that's accurate either, but it is instantaneous. And so if you're kind of like banking on having a certain amount of need-based financial aid, scholarship money, that sort of thing, the net price calculator is required to be there so that they can give you at least a very rough starting point on every single college's website. So they'll all be there. If you just Google Elmhurst College net price calculator, it will take you there. But thinking about balancing as Anita mentioned, so the reach, target, likely, safety, phrasing, it's terms that people use interchangeably. It's terms that we don't love. I think we would love to kind of treat it on a spectrum of predictable to unpredictable. Can't remember if I'm married, so maybe it's predictable to unpredictable, or whichever way it is appearing to you. But essentially what we're talking about there, they're terms that people use interchangeably, but sometimes mean totally different things. So it's all just kind of a spectrum of where of likelihood of admission, for lack of a better term. So in keeping with that, as we define our own terms, when you think about what are the reach or stretch schools, it's very clear there are the places that are just sort of, for some students, it's kind of outside their wheelhouse. They don't really fit the profile academically. It will be definitely a stretch for them applying. There are also ways to consider it that aren't necessarily apparent. Like if you just look at the overall admit rate and overall averages, those don't usually take into account things like whether you're an in-state student or an out-of-state student, which matter to some colleges and states and not others. And so if you are an out-of-state student and you are applying to Michigan, you will be deferred in the early action pool, but then you might get into the regular action pool. I mean, I had my first one in 9 years, my first student who actually was admitted into the early action pool like that. So like almost everyone gets deferred from Michigan in the early action pool. That's just the way it is. But a lot of states, most states, honestly, have some sort of balancing that they try to do in terms of in-state versus out-of-state populations. And out-of-state includes international students a lot of times. So I live in Washington. I live in Seattle. University of Washington has it's not written into law, it's not codified, but they always aim to have about 2/3 in-state students and about 1/3 out-of-state students. Someplace like North Carolina, it's in the law. It has to be, I believe it's 80%, 75 or 80% in-state students. It's something like that. And someplace like University of Texas, or actually the UT system, you have the law, I forget what it's called, but it's automatic enrollment for students who are in the top 6 or 7% of their graduating class at their high school, wherever the high school happens to be in the state of Texas, are guaranteed admission to one of the UT campuses. So as an out-of-state student, those spots are already spoken for, essentially. That makes it a reach. The other thing that makes some of these places reaches that you just have to be very aware of is any college for computer science, engineering, or business. And I want to just underscore, bold, raise it to 48 font, computer science. You are almost always going to be, it's almost always going to be a reach. It's not to say don't try, it's not to say don't apply, but there is infinitely more demand than supply for computer science spots within the United States. So, and around the world. So when you're thinking about these colleges and you see, oh, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign has an admit rate of, I don't know exactly what it is. I'll just use one that I know off the top of my head. University of Washington has an admit rate of 40%, 45%. That's in state, which is closer to 2/3, and out of state, which is closer to 20%. It also includes computer science, which if you are an out of state student applying to the University of Washington for computer science, the admit rate is 3%. So just thinking about these things, that it's not just one number. There are a lot of factors that go into it. Target schools are the ones where we're talking about, okay, you actually have a more likely than not place. It's not right in the middle because it's 50-50. It's because it seems likely. It wouldn't be a shock if you applied to 4 target schools that you didn't get admitted to all 4, but it might be a shock, and things would have to be probably quite a bit different one year to another if you weren't admitted to any of them. So target schools are definitely the more likely than not. And then the likely and safe options are the ones where you are almost, things would have to be way different in order for you not to be admitted. And they are also the ones that are more likely to give you financial assistance and be able to provide that sort of safety net for you. And like I say, we usually recommend at least one of those be an in-state safety. And then I'll go just in terms of the last steps for timing and priorities. Anita, on the last slide here, I'll just go through it relatively quickly. This is sort of thinking about the things you would be thinking about during spring and summer of junior year. And there are a lot of things they are all things that you can do in parallel. So you can be building out your college list. You can be started on your Common Application. Just make sure you're only filling out the Common App part of the application, not that you're filling out the college specific stuff, because if you look very closely, or even not that closely, you'll see that the application deadline is listed as 2022 or January of 2023. All of that stuff gets deleted at the end of July. So just fill out the Common App section. But they're all things that you're going to have to do, and they're all things that other applications are going to ask you to do also. So it's a great, the way I explain it to students, it's a mindless way to make progress that you're going to have to do. You can just put on whatever you want to put on TV, and you can just type away. And if your parents bother you and say, "What are you doing?" you just say, "I'm working on my college applications. Please stop bothering me." And you can do that probably a few times, but it's only going to take you about 45 minutes. But it's information that you're going to have to put in there anyway. And the thing about the Common App is it has, I don't even know what it is anymore, 800 or 900 colleges that are members, which means if 10 of those 800 colleges want something to be required, then it's required for everybody. So the Common App is extremely comprehensive, I guess, is a nice way of saying invasive and covers really random stuff. But there is nothing on the UC app that doesn't appear on the Common App. So once you have that filled out, you can just translate it over into other applications. And then last but not least, in terms of the work that you can also get done, not necessarily during the school year. I don't recommend working on essays during the school year, but everything you can get done during the summer is stuff you don't have to do when school starts. So we want all of our students ideally to have their personal statement at least in draft form, and if they're applying to UCs, have their personal insight questions worked on before the end of July, because August 1st is when those applications roll over to next year.
Great. I want to leave just a couple of minutes for questions, but just want to, just reiterate a lot of things that we said, and just a couple of pointers. Start early, start now, not tomorrow. Be open-minded and know that there's more schools out there than you can possibly know about, and lots of great fits out there. Reflect on yourself. What do you need? What do you want? Stay organized. The more schools you apply to, the more organized you have to be about keeping track of deadlines and requirements and additional things that they might need. Ask for support. Your school counselors are fantastic. Your parents, other people who've been through the process. You can certainly reach out to Collegewise. And then think about your own self-learning. This college thing is, it's a little bit of a rite of passage. It's also a great way to learn more about yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, I try to find purpose in everything, and that is what I think. As we answer questions, there's also, one last slide. We always say it's not where you go, but how you do there. and make the best of whatever it is. All right, now really, last slide. If you have questions, you're welcome to email us. You're welcome to reach out to Collegewise. And I'm going to do this last poll over here, which is, if I can figure this one out, back. Okay. Okay, I'm going to launch one more poll, and you are welcome to, say if you'd like some more information from Collegewise, and someone will reach out to you. But in the meantime, I think there are a couple of questions. Tom, did you see a couple of
Yes.
these?
So this is maybe a good one for you, Anita. A
Mhm.
tip for getting students engaged with the college search,
Mm,
for a student that is interested but kind of intimidated by
yeah,
everything.
great question. I mean, it is intimidating, I will tell you, but I think focusing, you want to go back to the slide with the quote. I think focusing on how your student learns best and what's the way to keep them involved. So like I said, students have lots of different, like, maybe learning styles. Some students like to listen to podcasts, others want to watch a TV show. At the beginning stages, it doesn't really matter how you begin as long as you begin. If searching a website feels like too much, then maybe watching a short YouTube video is better. And then that way at least she's got started and can find a couple of things. um, but I'll tell you, it is hard to stay engaged because there's a lot, and students are very, very busy. I think also, this time of year, Tom and I are, working with a lot of students who have APs coming up, finals, maybe they're taking SAT, ACT, maybe waiting till summer when they've got a little less on their plate is also helpful. Tom, do you want to answer the one about don't do essay writing during the year? Did you mean to do not start the essay until summer, or did he mean finish in summer, not fall? Just some
Um,
clarification about essay work, when to do it.
about essay work and timing. So what I would recommend is that all students start working on their personal statements and try to have it in, because the personal statement, when people talk about the college essay, that's what they mean, the personal statement. So it's kind of it's not internal terminology, but it's what it's called on the Common App. So when people say college essay, they mean personal statement. And we try to have students have that done by the end of July. And the reason for that is that on August 1st is when the supplemental essays for those in all of the individual colleges that they might be applying to will open. So they working on those supplemental essays now could change. But the reason we want to have the personal statement done is that the supplemental essays are supplemental. They are in addition to the personal statement. So if you write all about taking your rowboat fishing with your grandparent every Thursday for your entire life, if that's what your personal statement is about, and then one of the supplemental questions is tell us about something that's meaningful to you, you don't want to write about that again. So you use your personal statement as an anchor point that then all of those supplemental essays for an individual college might fill in the gap. In terms of timing, some students might start early, some students might, it just depends on what their schedule is. The supplemental question, or excuse me, the personal statement prompts will not change. They are exactly the same for next year, same with the personal insight questions. So if you look at Common App questions right now, that is what they will be for next year. When we work with students, we always tell them to ignore the questions because you can write about anything and apply it to a question. It doesn't really matter for the personal statement. But if you would just want to see what they are, they will not change. And you go from there. But timing wise, I was referring to the personal statement that, it's really not that long. It's 650 words.
Mhm.
Makes it sound longer than just saying it's a page and a little bit when you say it in terms of word count. But the hardest thing is starting. And once you have words on a screen, you can work with that.
I think we're going to answer one last question, and then we will probably call it quits. And I apologize, we're not going to answer the early decision, early action question, but we could talk for for days about that one. Is merit aid rare is the other question. And no, it is not. The best way to think about merit aid is if you go to a college where you are kind of at the top of the pile academically, that you've got maybe more than the average stats going in, you're more likely to get merit aid. But we see merit aid for a lot of our students. And it just depends on the college. I will tell you that the highly selective schools, so all the Ivy Leagues, the Ivy Plus schools, whatnot, they don't give any merit aid at all. So there's a bunch of schools where they only give need-based aid that's determined by FAFSA. But there are a number of schools that do give merit aid. It's usually, I would, it's, I would say it's more of the regional schools. And that's probably too much of a stereotype, but a lot of the smaller, more regional schools will give quite a bit of merit aid to students who have certain GPAs and test scores. There's actually a lot of grids out there that will tell you, like, with this GPA or with this test score or with this whatever eligibility, that they will give scholarships, merit aid based scholarships. I often tell my students, Google the name of the school and the word scholarships, and you will see what kind of scholarships that particular school might offer. All right, Tom, I think with that, thank you all so, so much for coming. We really appreciate your time and attention. And, if you'd like to ask us other questions, feel free to reach out, follow us on any social media. We've got a lot of information there. And we're happy to talk and help as we can. Thanks so much. Good night.
Hey, we did it.
I want to make sure we're